Good evening. Welcome to the May 12th, 2014 meeting of the Fayetteville Planning Commission. Please take this opportunity to silence your cell phones, or turn them off completely. Mr. Garner, would you please call the roll?
Noble.
Here.
Selby.
Here.
Autry.
Here.
Hoskins.
Here.
Chesser.
Here.
Ponchel.
Here.
Here. Winston. Bunch.
Here.
Okay. And Commissioner Winston will be here. He'll be just a few minutes late. First item of business is the consent agenda, and there's only one item on the consent agenda, the approval of the minutes from the April 28th, 2014 meeting.
Mr. Chair, make a motion to approve consent agenda.
Second.
We have a first by Commissioner Cook and a second by Commissioner Aubrey. Andrew? Sorry.
Noble.
Yes.
Selby.
Yes.
Autry.
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Chesser.
Yes.
Ponchel.
Yes.
Cook. Bunch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. First item is old business, rezoning 14-4687 for 659 North Genevieve Avenue in Davis, submitted by Bates and Associates. Proposed zoning from RA residential agriculture, approximately 1.62 acres, and the request is to rezone to RSF2, residential single family, 2 units per acre. And Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Planning Commission reviewed this item 2 weeks ago, April 28th. At that time, the applicant was requesting RSF4 zoning. Staff had recommended denial of that request from RA to RSF4. The Commission talked about it a little bit, spoke with the applicant about it, and asked him if he wanted to consider the RSF2 zoning district based on his description of what the property owners wanted to accomplish with the property. He went back and did look at survey of the property and revised the request letter to go with RSF2. We've included that revised letter in an actual survey of the property so you can see a little bit more clearly what the plans are for this property. Just again, the background on it, it's 1.5 acres. It's on Tackett Drive and Genevieve Avenue. This is west of 54th. This is fairly far west Fayetteville area that was developed in the late 1970s. The lots of this area range in size from 0.63 acres to 2.4 acres. There is a standard RSF4 subdivision just a few lots to the east of this area. So there is a variety of land uses, but in our opinion, the predominant land use area is very rural, fairly large lot. The roads in this area are very narrow, not really even meeting the 20-foot fire code requirement for a public street. They just have never been improved. They're open ditch, no curb or gutter. In our opinion, just looking at the land use, we think what's existing here is appropriate. The RA zoning district is representative of the surrounding land uses, and we believe that that's an appropriate zoning designation. Changes in this to RSF2 or RSF4 will net essentially the same density. You'll probably get 2 or 3 units on this property. As shown with RSF2, they're able to get 2. I think with RSF4, you might be able to get 3 houses in addition to the existing duplexes on the property. It's still a relatively small lot size, 0.41 acres, or 17,860 square feet is a requirement in RSF2. So we still look at this as a fairly suburban, certainly not a rural designation as what the land use is in this area. And so we are continuing to recommend denial of this rezoning request. Thank you.
Okay. Is the applicant present? You'll introduce yourself, sir.
Sure. My name is Derek Thomas with Bates and Associates, and I was here last time for the RSF4 request. I guess we just have the same argument that there's RSF4 close by. Staff wants to keep it RA. I think I guess the compromise was RSF2. That's why we changed our proposal to that. It's a little less dense than the RSF4. The lots are roughly half acre, so they're normal, or as you can see on the survey, they're a little bit bigger than a quarter acre lot that you typically see in RSF4 zoning. But feel that RSF2 is fair to our client and to the city as well. So just appreciate your consideration.
Okay. That's it? All right. Thank you very much. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it to the commission. Any comments from anybody? No comments?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So, one of the issues I have is the 2-inch water line that services this area, and what is, I guess, where's the nearest, largest connection to 2-inch? I mean, does it connect into a 4, a 6, somewhere nearby, or is that 2-inch service quite a few houses along the way, or does anybody know that off the top of their head?
I'm not sure,
No.
Corey, do you have any idea?
No.
Sure.
Okay.
Is that it?
That was it.
Any other comments or questions?
I guess I missed a little bit, but how many houses did they discover they could build on this
Maximum 2.
maximum two? And is it actually buildable for 2, or?
Yep. The applicant went back, did his due diligence, found that, they could go with the RSF 2 zoning and make it work for what they wanted to do instead of the RSF 4, which would be slightly more dense.
Mr. Chair, I have a question for your planning staff. Have we had any of the neighbors complain about this to planning, Jesse?
We've had a neighbor ask questions about it, but no one's objected to the request, no.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question, for staff. The lot that is, I guess, due south to this property, looking at the, land use map that I have, is the property to the south, is that zoned RSF 4?
Yes, it is zoned RSF4, it's a duplex also.
Do you know what the history of the, just to give myself, just kind of some peace of mind before I make a decision on this, do you know what the history of that property is, how they obtained RSF4, how long it's been?
I would say it's probably been in the last 10 years that took place. The future land use map has changed once, if not twice, probably since that rezoning, but the actual specific findings and discussions of it, why it was even requested, because it's never been changed from the existing duplex use ever since it's been rezoned to RSF4, so I don't have specific information on that.
Because I really don't see a problem with an RSF2, zoning for this project or what they're proposing. Certainly not seeing any plans in front of me as far as how they plan to, situate anything on that property. I really don't have a problem with it, with what the applicant's proposing. But with that, I really don't have anything else to add. I'd be interested to hear what anybody else had to say, as far as what their thoughts were anyway.
Okay, thank you. Well, if there's no other comments, Jesse, would you mind zooming out on that just a little bit? Can you, or Andrew, I'm sorry. You probably got control of the mouse. The property, you can see a subdivision to the south and west of this property. Looks like it's heading like towards Farmington. Do you know what the density of that subdivision is?
No, I don't know. It looks like a typical RSF4 type neighborhood.
Okay. As far as my fence, I don't have any problem with RSF2. I don't think we're in the mindset to be annexing property. So, and I know this is a little bit further out or what have you, but and this is a very, very low density request for the outlying areas or what have you, and so I don't have any problem with it. We're going to be infilling a lot more than this in the near future, so. Motions, anybody?
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that rezoning, 14-4687 be forwarded to the city council for final vote.
Second. Okay. You two guys. We have a, motion by Commissioner Autry and a second by Commissioner Noble. Andrew?
Noble,
Yes.
Shelby,
Yes.
Autry,
Yes.
Hoskins,
Yes.
Jesser,
No.
Honchul,
Yes.
Cook,
No.
Bunch,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay,
Oh, I'm here now.
Winston,
No.
Still
motion
carries.
carries.
it still passed. Okay, all right, thank you. The next item is administrative item 14-4720, updates to the drainage criteria manual and the UDC amendment, Chapter 169, physical alteration of land, Chapter 170, stormwater management, drainage and erosion control, and Chapter 179, low density, or low impact development. And we're looking for Sarah Reed, I believe.
Oh, I can give you an update on this. This item, we're requesting it be tabled indefinitely. There were quite a few, we discussed this at your previous planning commission meeting. There were some changes, including some, code changes that correspond to changes in the drainage manual. So we're requesting it to be tabled indefinitely. We'll re-notify the public and bring it back when we feel like it's closer to, for you guys to consider and forward on.
Okay, however, it's probably a good idea to see if there's any public who'd like to comment.
Yes.
Okay, so at this time, if there's anybody who'd like to comment on this in public, please step up. And if you will, keep your comments short, to the point, and as brief as possible.
Thank you. I'm Aubrey Shepherd, and low-impact development's the most important thing you have to consider. Right now, if you weren't in this meeting, you could be seeing streams flooding and streets flooding, and understand why you need to allow natural soil to stay where it is. Reduce the paving everywhere you can, reduce the red dirt use covering the land, and try to leave absorbent soil. That's the only thing that will protect people and property, wildlife, trees, and so forth, everything downstream, all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. So, when this comes up, I may not be here that night again, but it's important. I wish you could all be out there right now driving around after a burst of rain we had a while ago and see what it's doing. And that's where I'm going, so enjoy the rest of your agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shepherd. Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to comment on this?
Mr. Chair.
Seeing none, we're gonna bring it back to the commission. We're gonna start with Commissioner Winston.
So I'll move to, table indefinitely administrative item 14-4720.
Okay. We have a, motion by Commissioner Winston and a second by Commissioner Cook. Andrew?
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry,
Yes.
Hoskins,
Yes.
Jesser,
Yes.
Honchul,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
Bunch,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay. That brings us to our first item of new business. Item number 4, conditional use permit 14-4694, for 1605 North Hillcrest, submitted by Matthew Cheadle for property located at 1605 Hillcrest Avenue. The property is zoned C2 thoroughfare commercial and contains 2.24 acres. The request is for a conditional use permit to build an accessory structure. Okay, staff, which would be Mr. Fulcher.
Sure. This is the field on the north side of Evelyn Hills Shopping Center. It sits behind the old Easy Mart gas station, residential property all to the east of this. Property owner, Mr. Cheadle, lives actually next door in the house, just to the north of this property. This property is accessed from Ash Street. Recently purchased this field, 2.24 acres, and really just wants to put an accessory building on this property, a barn essentially, for storage of his equipment that would be used to take care of this field. It's been an agricultural state forever, and he has no plans to do anything with this property other than maintain it. May begin to see some agricultural gardening type use on this property, which would be something more than likely allowed by right. But really, there's no changes proposed to this property, but because there is not a principal building on this property, the Planning Commission has to allow this only by conditional use per Chapter 164. So the applicant has submitted that as his request. We have a determination by the Planning Commission of compatible building and use of the property. You have mini storage to the north, commercial to the west and south, and this is really more of a residential, rural residential type building, so it's certainly not incompatible with those commercial uses on three sides. It joins his residential property on one side and really is just an accessory building that you would find on a lot of residential property, so we don't find it to be incompatible with the neighborhood to the east. And then, of course, this barn is permitted only for storage for personal use by the homeowner. This isn't intended to be any type of commercial building unless something were to change and be approved by the planning commission in the future. So with that, staff is recommending approval of this request. Thank you.
Okay. Is the applicant available, please? Page 156. Thank you. Something we're gonna work on, I assure you.
Matt Cheadle,
Okay.
applicant.
If you will introduce yourself and,
Matt Cheadle.
okay?
I lived in the property just north of here for about 16 years.
You need to kind of speak into the microphone a little bit, please.
I've lived just north of this field for about
You can pull it up.
16 years.
There you go.
And recently had the opportunity to acquire the field. Really didn't want apartments in my backyard, and so primarily initially bought it for that, and it's been a pasture probably for 50 years. My goal is to keep it a pasture with some gardening, strictly gardening type operation there to keep it totally agricultural. But there's not really, as I understand it, an agricultural zoning within Fayetteville. The proposed structure is it's a barn. It's to hold the tractor and the bush hog and all that sort of stuff.
That's it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak to this? You can have a seat, sir. We'll call you back. Okay. Sorry about that. Is there any member of the public who'd like to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Winston.
you know, I always say people wanted to affect what happens on the property next to them. If they can buy it, that's one way to do it. I think it's a fantastic way to go about it, if you can pull it off. And I think it's a beautiful field. It's really nice to have an area in town that close to college that's agricultural. It really sort of it's a little breath of fresh air, and so I'm supporting this.
Thank you.
Second. Is that a motion?
I'll make a motion. So, let's see if I'm on the right one. This is page 1 of 13. You got the right, everything. Okay. So I'll move to approve conditional use permit 14-4694 for Cheadle.
Second. Okay. There were a second on this time. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Winston and a second by Commissioner Noble. Andrew?
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Hoskins?
Yes.
Jesser?
Yes.
Anchel?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Yes.
Bunt?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Next item on the agenda, number 5, is administrative item 14-4726, submitted by Craft and Toll for property located at Razorback Road and 15th Street. Property is zoned urban thoroughfare and contains approximately 4.42 acres. Request is for modification to a condition of approval for a variance of the streamside protection zone. And that would be Sarah Reed. Standing in for Sarah Reed tonight will be Corey.
Sure. This, basically there was administrative items to approve this project based on its proximity to the streamside protection zone. So there were all sorts of conditions of approval, and one of those was to require bioretention areas to treat some of the parking lot runoff that went west off the site towards the creek. And after they got further into the design process, basically no water would be contributing to these features. So we felt it was appropriate for this to come back to the commission they were gonna propose an alternative LID method, and the method they're now proposing is, underground detention with the inclusion of what's called an isolator row. This would be kind of a sediment forebay type area underground that would achieve a similar treatment goal as the fire retention areas. I can answer any other technical questions you may have on there.
Okay. Is there any member of the audience that'd like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner West.
Our agenda session, I was asking about, the ability to clean out the, we have an applicant, never mind. Jump the gun.
Yes, the applicant.
Moving right along.
Oh, you know what? I made a boo-boo, didn't I? Let's hear from the applicant. What are we saying? Do with me.
Sure, thank you. My name's Jonathan Ely. I'm with Craft and Toll. Just to kind of add to what Corey had summarized, the original intent behind the stream side, the conditions of approval that we decided on back then was to treat stormwater we felt was going to be coming off the parking lot before it entered the creek. After looking at our grading and detention design and how all that was going to work together, it turned out that it was more effective to keep all the drainage kind of interior to the parking lot, so nothing would directly go towards the stream that would need to be treated in that manner. So kind of what we were looking at is a more efficient way to do that treatment for total suspended solids and things that we're looking at for a bioswale to treat. So the underground detention system we were using is a Storm Tech isolator row, and it basically is a underground arch chamber system that has a filter fabric wrapped around the first row, and it forces all stormwater to go into that first row first, and it filters all the sediment, floatables, everything like that out of that before it goes into the rest of the chamber system. And that allows you to really isolate the debris and trash and everything like that, clean it out of that one system on an annual basis, and kind of achieve the same, low impact development that a bioretention cell would give you. So that's the request. If there's any other questions, I'll be happy.
Did you say it's an annually, it needs to be maintained by
That's correct.
flushing?
Yep, and Sarah did mention that there may be some questions about maintenance. I've got some kind of summaries about that I can pass around, but in general, the manufacturer's recommendations is for the first year, it's a every 6 months for the first year, and then annual basis after that. So, and it varies from region to region, and how much debris is going into it. So it's one of those things that kind of has to be adapted as you go, but that's their general recommendation, which is what we would recommend as the engineer. So and we can include that in our design drawings, our construction documents, the easement dedication plats, and all those things to make it part of the documents.
So you wouldn't have any trouble then making that as a condition of approval for this
No, sir.
variance? Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry for not recognizing you earlier. Okay, we're back to the commission again.
Okay, so the question was, largely was what you were talking about was, how you can clean it out. Does it lose performance over time, essentially? And, so if you wanted to speak to that. And, what, for staff, would be, what's the mechanism that, that the city would have to, make sure that they were cleaning it out every year or as needed? So if you want to speak to the deterioration of its effectiveness, if there is.
Sure, and some of the technical data that I've seen actually shows that it improves performance over time, because it actually, as it gets clogged, it filters better.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not much of a difference, in the technical data. You can see some of the comparisons that they've done on effluent downstream of it. But I think the manufacturer's not willing to make that argument that it actually improves, so they just stick with it stays the same. So as far as the other question, I'm not sure what that mechanism is.
Mr. Chair, if I could maybe address some of those. I think if, at this point, if the commission is really concerned with the performance of this particular feature, we would recommend a condition of approval that just says the underground detention shall be maintained in accordance with the manufacturer's specifications by the applicant. And this note, we could require that note to be placed on the easement plat, and the underground detention area could potentially be placed in a public drainage easement. I would want to make sure the applicant was okay with that in case the city ever had to go in and actually clean it at some point. The full responsibility for that cleaning out would be private developer, but if in the case that the city needed to go in there and maintain that, we could.
I think I'd have to ask the city attorney if something like that would work. As far as a public easement on, what do you think?
Well, we can get an easement if you want to do that. The other thing we could do is simply, we go and cut grass when we don't have a maintenance easement, when someone is violating the standards and their ordinances that require you to upkeep your property. I do think there ought to be a condition of approval that requires them to comply with their manufacturer's recommendations, and also to annually report to planning that you have accomplished that.
Sure.
And beyond that, I think that if they fail to do that, then I think that the city has a right, without anything else, to go in to try to clean that up and to give them the bill, just like we do when we have to cut somebody's grass. And I'm sure that's not going to happen anyway. This is a commercial, even though it's a residential development, it's owned by one entity who's going to be responsible for all this. And so I think that probably it will be in good management and they'll follow all the rules.
Do you think that that should be certified by the property owner or by the engineer of record, that maintenance has occurred?
I would just leave it with the property owner. They're ultimately responsible for fulfilling all these duties. They hire engineers and stuff to do other work, but I think really it should be the property owner that's unrequired. And that's what this conditions of approval does, go to the property owner, might sell it in the future, and so let's not put it on the engineer of record who might not be working for the next property owner.
Okay. Any comments?
Mr. Chair, I just want to say that makes me feel fairly comfortable with, I mean, this might be a little bit experimental, but I think, we're an experimental city. We try new things, and we find out how they work here in our city. So I say let's go for it.
Okay. Any other comments? I guess my only comment is I actually installed one of these systems back in the mid-2000s or whatever, and it's performed very, very well. And I think there's another system up there under Signature Plaza, I think it is, and I think Fayetteville High School even implemented the same type of system.
I think they have concrete there.
That maybe it is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Kind of, there's some applications where it's better, to use concrete, and
Right.
some where it's better to use a system like this, and this is one of those systems we think can work.
Right, yeah, they're very good systems. Okay. Motion, please?
Mr. Chair, I would make a motion, administrative item 14-4726, Razorback and 15th Street Razorback Student Housing Project, be forwarded to the City Council with the provision of the underground detention be cared for by manufacturer specifications, and the property owner provide annual reports to the city.
Okay, I think this
This is actually an approval.
Approval, excuse me.
Approval at this point.
I would
Yeah.
amend my,
Thank you.
I'll second that.
thank you.
All right, so we have a motion to approve by Commissioner Autry and a second by Commissioner Winston. Andrew?
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry,
Yes.
Hoskins,
Yes.
Jesser,
Yes.
Honchel,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
Bunch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is large-scale development 14-4631, submitted by Buddy Webb Consultants for property located on North College and Drake Street. The property is zoned C2 thoroughfare commercial and contains approximately 2.58 acres. The request is for construction of a 7,453 square foot auto parts retail store. And Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Discussed this at subdivision committee a few weeks ago and a little bit at agenda session last week. As you said, it's a 7,500 square foot parts store, 33 parking spaces. on the undeveloped field there at Drake Street and College. Property has about 1,000 feet of street frontage. Along College is fairly steep, and it continues to get steeper as you head north on the property. So there's a lot of street frontage. It's actually a fairly large property, but a lot of it isn't being used. There's trees in the back that they're preserving, and then with the slope, and then there's also a drainage easement as well. So when you really look at the footprint of the development, it's only on about half the site, including the detention pond, with a large amount of street frontage. Really, the discussion on this project has not been anything associated with the project itself, but what the street improvements would be and what staff would recommend on those. Since we first had this at the technical plat review meeting where staff looked at this with the applicant, we asked them to look at construction of a sidewalk on College Avenue. That's where we felt it would be the most beneficial. There's an older sidewalk on Drake Street on the opposite side from this project, and so there is some pedestrian connectivity on Drake Street, though not great. There's none on College Avenue essentially anywhere. There are signs of pedestrian activities. There's a footpath worn through the field on this side of the street. This is, again, because of the topography, you don't have a lot of space between College and going down the side of the hills here. So it's a very, the footpath is very close to the curb line. And then once you get to either end of this property, you can actually get into some developed spaces and move a little bit more freely away from the traffic. And so we really pushed for them to come up with some cost estimates, knowing that it would be a challenge given the grade, especially as you head north on the site. The applicant has worked with us on that. We haven't always agreed on the actual amount of some of the improvements. I think our original cost estimate included some items that once the applicant looked at it, realized that those could be removed, such as relocating overhead power lines. Those are actually part of the development proposal, and we're going to be removed anyway. And so we began to chip away at the cost estimate on that sidewalk. Ultimately, we ended up at kind of two different ends, our cost estimate and the applicant's cost estimate. They ended up accepting our amount for sidewalk costs of about $15 per linear foot. It was the differences in the retaining wall and some of the grading soil work where our numbers were quite a bit different. I think what we came up with, though, in the end is, even with our cost estimate, it was less than their cost estimate. It was still an extremely high amount of money and burden to put on a 7,500 square foot auto parts store for a 500-foot sidewalk. When we looked at the actual cost of the sidewalk, you're looking at maybe $10,000 when you're looking at $15 per linear foot. And our cost estimate, even at the low end, would be sidewalk at the back of the curb, which no one agreed with. We didn't want to see a sidewalk at the back of the curb, and I think I've heard that comment from some of the commissioners as well. We were still looking in the $40,000+ range. So you're looking at a less than $10,000 sidewalk costing between $40,000 and $50,000 just to put it at the back of sidewalk. And that's due to the amount of grading and retaining wall work that's necessary. If you begin to push that sidewalk 3, 4, 5, 6 feet behind the curb, you're only going to increase some of those costs. So I think our estimate was on the low end of what it would actually take to accomplish, and it was still a very, very expensive sidewalk. Conversely, if you look at the cost of constructing about the same amount of sidewalk on Drake Street, where it is quite a bit flatter other than where it approaches College Avenue, it's probably going to run about $75,000 to $10,000 for that entire sidewalk. So there's a pretty big difference in the cost of improvements, and it's due to the grade and the challenges with the grade along College Avenue. So while we haven't come to an agreement on the exact dollar amount for the improvement along College, I think in our opinion, the cost for that improvement is well beyond what would be proportional to the impact of a 7,500 square foot auto parts store. So while we really want to see that sidewalk be constructed on College Avenue at this point, we're happy to have a brand new sidewalk constructed along Drake Street, and we'll begin to make some great pedestrian improvements in that area. We've made a condition in the staff report about adding a 20-foot access easement along College Avenue. There's already a 20-foot utility easement there, so it won't impact the applicant's property any more than it's already impacted. It would put an access easement over that area, and that would be outside the right-of-way for College Avenue. So hopefully at some point, through some venture of the city and or state, maybe if sidewalks are built along College as they have been to the south, closer to downtown, we'll have a little bit of leeway outside the right-of-way to do that necessary grading to put in those improvements. So hopefully that will happen at some point in the future. So we're recommending approval of the project with all that discussion. There are 2 variances and 4 findings for the Planning Commission. The first one is a variance from the curb cut separation. Drake Street is a minor arterial, requires a 250-foot curb cut separation. They're not providing that, but Drake Street is a very low-volume street, actually. The second driveway on the kind of north and west end of their property is really for their truck access. It really won't be used that much by the public, but it's necessary to be able to get to the backside loading areas for the building. They're also not requesting any access on College Avenue, so we think it's a good plan and it's a safe plan in our opinion. We're recommending approval of the variance on the curb cut separation. On street improvements, as I've stated, we're recommending sidewalk construction along Drake Street, 5-foot sidewalk at the right-of-way line, street lights every 300 feet starting at the intersection, and then the 20-foot pedestrian access easement over the existing utility easement for future sidewalk construction on College, and then right-of-way dedication in the amount of 43.5 feet along College as well. Determination of design standards for the building. This is something the applicants worked very well since the technical plat review meeting. They've added a number of elements on the building face that is along Drake Street, and we now feel that they meet the design standards and are recommending approval of that as well. And then the final variance is for the internal drive aisles. They're proposing 30-foot wide drive aisles. They've provided an auto turn analysis and discussed some of the issues with the drive aisle in front of the store, and I believe the subdivision committee recommended in favor of both that variance and the variance for the curb cut separations when this was discussed at subdivision committee. They also found in favor of the building design, and the sidewalk discussion was kind of ongoing, so any of the commissioners that were there that have some additional comments, please add those. But those are the four main items. The rest of the conditions are standard for large-scale development. Thank you.
Okay. All right, is the applicant present, please? Will, tell us your name and if anything you'd like to add, sir.
Good evening. My name is Paul with Anderson Engineering. We're the civil engineers of record on the project. Just like to say, appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight, and it's been a pleasure working with staff, and I think we've taken a tough site and turned it into something that'll be nice for everybody. So we agree with all of staff's recommendations tonight, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there any member of the audience who'd like to speak to this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. And before we get started, I think there's probably some different opinions of the sidewalk along North College, and one of the things I thought about was maybe separating that particular portion out of the overall vote on this project. I don't know what you think, Kit.
Why don't you just discuss it first and see if there's a consensus?
Right, and that's why I'm bringing it up, so as you're making your comments, if you'd also comment to that, that would be good. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Chesser.
Jesse, did I understand you, I heard you talk about the 20-foot public access easement. Did you say that the applicant had agreed to that?
Yes, the applicant has agreed to that as a condition, yes.
Okay. Given that, and given staff's thoughts on the expense of putting it along College and their desire to, I think, to put it on Drake Street at this point, I'm going to agree with staff. I think that given that we got the 20-foot access easement, it would, while normally I would say that I would expect the applicant to pay for that sidewalk, given the pretty high burden of costs, I'm going to agree with staff and hope that since we have that 20-foot easement, we can do something much more interesting there in the future. So that's where I stand on it. Thank you.
Mr. Chair. So comment, since I was there at subdivision, and I think the consensus was we wanted the sidewalk on College Avenue, but we were still trying to figure out what that cost was, and I think from reading the engineer's comments in the packet that they got a little more specific on what we wanted to see, because at subdivision we were talking about just back a curb sidewalk, and then it was like, okay, that's not what we really want on 71, and I can see they got a little more specific. So I mean, while I would rather have the pedestrian access along College, I think that costs us a bit much for the applicant to bear. So I tend to agree with what staff has at this point too.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair,
First Weston.
I'll move to approve large-scale development 14-4631, Finding in favor of determination regarding access management to allow two curb cuts on Drake Street with only 93 feet of separation. Finding in favor of determination of street improvements, which requires a 20-foot pedestrian access easement along College, a 5-foot sidewalk shall be constructed along Drake Street, streetlights every 300 feet, and right-of-way dedication in the amount of 43.5 feet dedicated along College. Finding in favor of commercial design standards and the variance for driveway dimensions to allow 30-foot wide drive aisles and the other 17 conditions of approval.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Winston and a second by Commissioner Chester. Andrew?
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry,
Yes.
Hoskins,
Yes.
Chester,
Yes.
Honchel,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
Bunch,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is large-scale development of 14-4697, submitted by Jordan Associates for property located at 3535 North College. The property is on C2 thoroughfare commercial, contains 6.61 acres. The request is for 3 buildings totaling 61,572 feet and approximately 330 associated parking spaces. Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Luckily, one of the harder discussions that we typically have with projects is access management, and that's really been discussed. The Planning Commission made that decision a few weeks ago as far as the location and the design of their 2 driveways for this property. The property is an old car dealership at 35 North College Avenue, about 6.61 acres, a lot of grass on the north side, and pavement building on the south and west sides of the property. The applicants are proposing 4 buildings. The larger building in back has an attached but separate retail structure. So 4 total buildings of about 61,500 square feet and 331 parking spaces. Street improvements for this project are on one point fairly straightforward, which is just the standard 5-foot sidewalk at the right-of-way line along College Avenue. As part of the initial development of this property, they did conduct a traffic study, determined that a traffic study or a traffic signal would be warranted at Masonic in their primary driveway at College Avenue. They've taken all that information through the State Highway Department. They've given their preliminary approval. The City Council recently as well passed a resolution supporting cost to have that traffic signal installed as well, and those discussions are continuing. And then the location of the driveways, as I stated, the Planning Commission has already made those decisions. So a lot of the big items have been taken care of. Really with this, there are a finding of 2 variances, minor variances, that one of which was reviewed by the subdivision committee as far as the internal drive aisles, and then finding of street improvements and finding of design standards. At Planning Commission, there were some questions, I think, about the visibility of some of these buildings. I think what we realized is on the north side and the west side, all that's going to be retained, and all the trees will be retained in those areas. So it's going to be really, really challenging to be able to see the back sides of these buildings, whether it be from Millsap, Fulbright Expressway, or Plainview. I don't think you're really going to be able to see much of any parts of these buildings. They are well-articulated buildings, but I don't think you're going to be able to see those sides for the most part. The street-facing sides, all very well-articulated, in our opinion, meet commercial design standards. So we are recommending approval of all the architecture for this project. Item 2 is determination of street improvements. The traffic signal will be installed. Who bears those improvements is part of that resolution that was passed by the City Council. That would include crosswalks, pedestrian signals, all your standard intersection improvements that you'd want. I did have an email from a resident on Masonic Drive this week that had a question about would there be those type of pedestrian improvements at this intersection. It's my understanding that there would be. We've made it a condition, and we do want to see that as part of the overall improvement here to hopefully be able to link those residents into this large commercial area and get them over onto the west side of College. 5-foot sidewalk along the entire property frontage, street lights every 300 feet and at the intersection, and right-of-way dedication, the amount of 43.5 feet along College. Internal to the drive aisle, they have some 30 and 32-foot driveways. One of those is a truck delivery route, and then 2 of them are in front of the buildings. what we've seen, particularly along these larger, big box retail locations, is you really do want a wider drive aisle right in front of the store. Typically, you have drop-off, loading, unloading zones for customers, and so 24 is a little tight in those areas, and so they're proposing a 30 and then a 32 in front of one of the other retail buildings. We think that's appropriate, given the amount of traffic that will be generated in these areas. And then item 4 is a variance from the curb cut radius on College Avenue. They're proposing a 45-foot radius, and they provided an auto turn analysis for this. So their 18-wheeler delivery vehicles coming in that primary driveway, coming off College, even with a 45-foot radius, they're going to be kind of slicing into that next lane, into the outbound turn lane. So it's certainly necessary, based on what they've shown us, to increase those radiuses. And while it's not necessary all the time, it's necessary enough to get their delivery vehicles in there. So we're recommending approval of that variance as well. There will be easements, as the Planning Commission recommended with the curb cut discussion a few weeks ago. Of course, they're going to have the ability to stub out in the future through easements there on the west and south side of the property if those properties develop in the future. All the other conditions are very standard for this project. I can answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present, please?
Good evening. My name is Justin Jorgensen with Jorgensen Associates, and I'm the civil on the project. And unfortunately, the applicant, S.J. Collins, was not able to be here tonight. So I've talked to them. We've reviewed all the conditions of approval and worked with staff a lot on some throat lengths and widths and stuff like that. And everyone's on the same page, and we're in agreement with everything. But I'll be glad to answer any questions you guys might have.
Okay, thank you, sir. Is there any member of the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Cook.
So we did work out the throat length on the main intersection there.
Yeah, sorry, I should have mentioned that at subdivision committee. I think we were less than 60 feet and much shorter at the primary driveway. We were less than 60 feet at the north driveway. The north driveway, which is the right-in, right-out, is now at 66 feet, so we're very satisfied with that. But I think as importantly, maybe more importantly, the primary driveway has been stretched out to about 160 feet. So we're looking at a lot of stacking space, and that's what we really wanted. Wanted 3, 4, 5, 6 vehicles to be able to get out of College Avenue if one decides to stop to pull into a parking space or to turn into the first retail spaces there on the south side of the property. So yeah, we're very satisfied.
Also at subdivision, there was some discussion about that patio area on the southern outbuilding, about the retaining wall there and stuff. Whatever came of that? Because I thought city staff wasn't satisfied with what they were showing on that retaining wall. Was I wrong with that?
No, yeah, Corey did have some comments, and I think he has some updates on that as well.
The applicant was able to meet the intent of the illustrations in the ordinance for those setbacks, and I believe those walls along College as well as along the south are going to be poured in place, so their limits of construction are going to be very small.
Okay.
And they'll be able to keep the clearance from that easement that we discussed with them. So
Okay.
they've worked that out.
Does that answer it? Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Winston.
you know, I like to see buildings pushed up to the street, and I think that this kind of accomplishes that in a way by having that building to the south, making sort of outdoor space out of that parking lot. And so I applaud the design, and I think it's really great having the streets lined up with the other streets in the area and getting that traffic light in there. I think it makes a lot of sense. It looks like a really good project to me.
Sir?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chesser?
I wanted to commend the applicant because I thought that the idea to come through early with the questions that they had, sort of the major questions about getting in and out of the site, the traffic light, was a wise decision. And I thought that what they asked for, it was like they had been watching us make decisions on stuff or something. I thought it was a very reasonable request. When they requested a second access, they requested, it was right-in only, right?
Right-in,
right-in, right-out only. So just sort of the things that we already would have probably asked for. So I was very impressed with that. I've been impressed through pretty much with them throughout this project, so, it will have my support for sure. And we'll see if there are any other comments, but I'd be happy to make a motion when ready.
I'd go for it if I were you.
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna move that we approve LSD 14-4697, finding in favor of the building designs under condition of approval number 1, finding in favor of the street improvements under condition of approval number 2, finding in favor of the variances under condition of approval number 3, and otherwise finding in favor of the other 21 conditions of approval.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner
Determination
Chess.
of number 4, too.
Oh, was there another determination?
The curb cut, or the curb radius.
And finding in favor of the curb radius determination also.
And re-second.
All right. We have a motion by Commissioner Chesser and a second by Commissioner Autry. Andrew, if you please call the roll, please.
Noble,
Yes.
Selby,
Yes.
Autry,
Yes.
Hoskins.
Yes.
Chesser,
Yes.
Montrose,
Yes.
Cook,
Yes.
Winston,
Yes.
Bunch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. All right, the next item on our agenda is conditional use permit 14-4705 submitted by Kimley Horn and Associates for property located at 1956 MLK Boulevard. Property zone C1 neighborhood commercial and C2 thoroughfare commercial. It contains 1.31 acres. The request is for additional parking. Okay, and that would be Mr. Filter.
Thank you. The conditional use, if you don't mind, I'll kind of describe the conditional use in large scale together. The property is the old Easy Mart store, and actually, since their initial submittal, they acquired or will acquire the shelter insurance office next door, so it became quite a bit larger lot, 1.3 acres. They'd be removing those structures and redeveloping the site. There's currently 4 existing driveways for the liquor store, which is to the west, the Easy Mart, and the shelter insurance company. And hopefully through this project, they'll reduce that all down to 2 shared driveways. So they'll have a shared driveway that they'll redesign with the liquor store that has kind of one large access out there, and then their eastern access into the property. So it'll be a great improvement along MLK as well. The conditional use is for 2 additional parking spaces. I realize on the large scale, I still reference 5 additional parking spaces, but it's only 2. Once they made some changes on the site, that was only 2 additional parking spaces, more than allowed by code. We're supportive of that. Again, one of the big things here is they have a 100% tree preservation on the property, so they've done a really good job designing around the features of the site, and so the 2 additional parking spaces obviously aren't creating an issue with green space or tree preservation. With the bonuses that they're able to provide under the parking code, they will be adding some LID stormwater techniques, so that will improve water quality leaving the site. 2 additional trees on the property as well. So we are supportive of the conditional use with 2 conditions of approval. On the large scale itself, the proposal is a 3,200 square foot drive-through restaurant, 44 parking spaces in total. The big discussion that we had with the applicants on the front end was access to Gabbard Lane to the north of this property. Gabbard Lane stubs out to the north. The right-of-way does. The street doesn't even quite make it down to the property, but the right-of-way there does. That's all, of course, residential area there to the north, combination of different type of units, but all residential in nature. We originally had recommended they make a street connection there. They actually designed the site with a street connection. I think the more and more that we analyzed it internally, the more concerns that we had once you go out there and start looking at the site and the function of the street and how the residents use it, and start thinking about who would be using that connection. Would this be kind of a benefit to the whole community to provide different types of connections that would try to facilitate movements off of the arterial roadways? What we saw is I think what we'd be doing is taking all the residences to the north of this property and giving them an opportunity to use a residential street to get into the back of a Whataburger to get food, or to the back of the liquor store to pick up whatever that might be. So we realized that we weren't creating something that was going to be a benefit to the immediate neighbors, but that was going to be a detriment to those neighbors at the benefit of everyone else in the larger area. We also took those same questions to our police department, had them look at it. they do look at site design and how things are laid out and how they function for public safety, for increases in crime or criminal behavior. And they came back with some of those same recommendations. They were nice enough to sit down with us, provide a memo to the planning commission that really highlights things that we didn't even think about, as school traffic, how this connection would increase left turns onto Martin Luther King, which is one of the big problems they have on Martin Luther King already, and this is just going to increase those turning movements. School drop-off for parents, and using Gabbard as a cut-through to get to the school, increasing congestion at one of their crosswalks at Sang and Mitchell. So they realized that there was a number of other things that we should be concerned about as well. So in the end, working with the applicant and the police department, the recommendation we came up with was, let's make this a pedestrian connection. Let's open up the users so that people can walk down to the commercial businesses along MLK into this business. Get rid of the old wood board privacy fences that kind of create these enclosed, darkened areas that the police department has concerns with, and open it up with more of a wrought iron style fence. Put some pedestrian lighting back there, put a pedestrian connection in, and that's what the applicants, again, that were great to work with on this project, came up with that proposal, and that's what you see on your site plan. And those are kind of the overall reasons why we're not recommending that vehicular connection and recommending the pedestrian connection to the back of this property. Once we were beyond that, they had the 100% tree preservation. We were on really great terms on this project all the way through. The building, there are a few findings for the Planning Commission. One is the determination of commercial design and development standards. We feel this building easily meets those requirements. Item 2, the drive aisles. This was a question that came up at subdivision committee. The auto turn analysis they provided obviously shows their delivery vehicles, the large truck traffic coming in their eastern driveway, looping around the drive and needing that 30 feet in those two locations. But the question was on the west side of the building in the drive-through, where they're showing, I think, 34 feet. And the explanation that we'd been provided was that they actually double stack drive-through traffic, not only through the two drive-through order windows where you order your food, which we see at a couple of different restaurants, but they'll actually allow them to come all the way around the building and stack side by side and have their employees walk food orders out to the vehicles. And the commissioners at subdivision committee asked for some more information on that. I think the applicant provided some responses to that this is something that they do at their busiest stores, and they expect the store close to the university campus to be a very busy store, and so they're going to go ahead and design this in. So, based on the applicant's responses to this information, we're supportive of that variance as well. Street improvements under item 3 is very straightforward: 5-foot sidewalk, right-of-way dedication, 43.5 feet from center line, and street lights along the property frontage. Determination of connectivity, as I've stated, it would be a pedestrian connection with those pedestrian amenities included in the design on the north side of the project. And then the inclusion of the access drives within access easements and an access easement along the east property line for a future connection if the property to the east were ever to be redeveloped. 2 other minor conditions for large scale, and then standard conditions beyond that. Thank you.
Okay, so now, with that staff report, shall I assume that I should have probably put items number 8 and 9 together, because I did not originally put the large-scale development in there?
No, we cheat and we just read the whole thing together.
I'm good with
that. The conditional use, but voting-wise, if you would vote on the conditional use first.
Okay, all right, great. Okay, well, so is the applicant present, please? Can't speak. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Joe Neely. I'm the Director of Design with Whataburger, and appreciate this opportunity to discuss what will be our first location in Northwest Arkansas with you tonight. We've worked closely with city staff and I think addressed or incorporated all of their concerns and issues, as well as being able to explain some of our functional requirements to develop the site. So I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Is there any member of the audience who'd like to speak to this item? Either the conditional use permit or the large-scale development? Okay. If you'd state your name, sir, and...
I'm Brent Barnes, Shelter Insurance there, right with the building that he had up there. Just wanted to kind of speak on their behalf. They've been good to me. I know I've seen some of the planning stuff, and, you know, one thing that happens when stuff like this happens is, yes, I'll be moving out, buying something downtown, close to the square, really doing an infill project, kind of redoing something, so I'm excited about that. I've seen the traffic, the pedestrian traffic and some of the things. You know, I didn't know, I just got back here about 2.5 years ago, and just seeing what had happened in that Easy Mart area was just kind of, I'm excited for them, because what's happening is needed. That building's kind of become an eyesore, people sleeping on the concrete. I mean, come into some pretty interesting things, and actually, it's crazy because it's such a pretty area, so close to the university, and like, I'd work till 1 o'clock in the morning. I mean, just kind of spook getting out of there, you know, just because of the stuff going on. So, number one, I think it's a good project. I mean, I see what's going on there. I think it's really going to add value. It's already kind of Burger Row, and, you know I went through there when I was in college here, and I'm excited to get downtown, so I'm kind of vacating one to go do something really cool with another building. So I'm excited for it, and I totally support it. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Yes, ma'am, if you'll come up and give us your name and address and tell us what you're thinking.
My name is Dorothy Ashworth, and I own property to the west of this on Phillip Drive. It's a triplex, 598 Phillip Drive. And I guess I had a question, Mr. Fletcher?
Fulcher.
Fulcher, sorry.
It's fine.
Did I hear you say that it was going to be a metal iron, or a wrought iron fence as a barrier?
Not on your side,
Okay.
because on the north side, it adjoins a street right-of-way. We did want to keep that open, but on your side, you're on the west side, and that would be a wood board fence.
Okay.
Unless,
That's what I would hope
Okay.
for privacy.
yeah, because it was a backyard of a residence, we felt that should be screened, fully screened with a standard privacy fence, so that's a
Okay,
recommendation.
that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was easy. Anybody else from the public? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Winston.
it's nice to have projects that everybody's
Everybody's
everything's
watching-
kind of worked
watching it.
out and,
That's
you
right.
know, figured out what they want, and so, dealing with the conditional use permit, move to approve conditional use permit 14-4705 for Whataburger.
Second. Okay, let's start with that one. So we have a motion to approve conditional use permit 144705 from Commissioner Winston, and a second from Commissioner Chesser. Mr. Garner, would you call the roll?
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Hoskins?
Yes.
Chesser?
Yes.
Anchel?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Motion
Okay.
carries.
All right, and that brings us to large-scale development
So,
1469.
move to approve large-scale development 14-4669 for Whataburger, finding in favor of, here we go. Commercial design and development standards, number one. Number two, driveway dimensions to allow for 30 to 34-foot wide driveways. Number three, determination of street improvements. There's 3 items on there, finding in favor of all of those. Determination of connectivity, not making connection through Gabbard Street, doing the wrought iron fence on the north, the wood board fence on the west, and the, that's in the next one. And pedestrian scale lighting along the north side. And the other conditions of approval that have to do with large-scale development, with the wood board fence and tree preservation, and the other 21 conditions of approval.
Second, but my waistline does not thank you.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Winston and a second by Commissioner Chesser. Mr. Garner, if you call the roll, please.
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Hoskins?
Yes.
Chesser?
Yes.
Anchel?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. That brings us to our next item, conditional use 14-4692, submitted by Charles and Judith Larson for property located at 8525 Goose Creek Road, property zoned in residential agriculture, and contains 3.39 acres. The request is for a conditional use permit to build a 1,080 square foot accessory structure. Mr. Fulcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an existing residential property, zoned agricultural. This is just about as far West Fayetteville you can go before you get into the,
Before
to the
you're no
county.
longer in West Fayetteville.
Goose Creek, is behind this property. This is a very rural area, large, single-family lots, all in the area. There's an existing 1,300 square foot home. They've got the carport for the property is actually detached, so it kind of counts against them in this equation that we're talking about. And then they have a smaller, just standard, garden shed to the right of the house. They recently purchased property and want to do a small mother-in-law quarter with a carport attached. And so that total building is the 1,080 square feet that we're discussing. So it's a 600 square foot accessory dwelling unit, so that meets what our code allows you to do by right. So they're not asking for any variances or anything associated with the living portion. It's the fact that that, along with the carport, is a 1,000 square foot structure, and that's more than 50% the size of the home. And that's not even counting the fact that they have their own carport for their house and a little shed. So under Chapter 164, if you want to have one or more accessory structures that in total exceed 50%, requires conditional use approval by the Planning Commission. Again, this property is almost 3.5 acres. If you look at surrounding properties in this area, everyone has multiple accessory buildings. It's very common. The further you get from the center of the city, the more accessory structures you have and the larger they are. That's just how it tends to be. So it's certainly not an inappropriate use of the property to have one more accessory building. It's very far. It's over 200 feet away from the closest residential unit on Goose Creek Road. And so we feel it's an appropriate request, given the size of the property and the area that this property is located in. Haven't heard any comments from the public to this point. There is a determination by the Planning Commission of whether this is an appropriate building for this property. That's finding number 1. And then item 2 is just a reminder that, of course, accessory dwelling unit has to meet all the requirements of the code standards set up for that. And that's all we have. Thank you.
Okay. Is the applicant present? If you will, come up and introduce yourself and tell us what you'd like to add.
Hi, I'm Judith Larson. Thanks for your time and service. Jesse's been great to work with. I don't really have a lot to add. I would like to say that the carport, though, I don't like things that look ticky-tacky, ricky, slapped-together things. So if I built the 600 square foot house and couldn't add the carport, then I'd be throwing up one of those little metal aluminum things, and I don't really want that. I want this to look cohesive and very nice with what we have. It's a nice-looking property. We want to enhance the neighborhood. All the buildings will be the same color and look very cohesive. So I think the carport, even though it is a carport, I think it's important to build it while we're building the... And if you approve this, my husband will thank you, because then his mother-in-law won't have to live with us. Thank you.
Well, I would ask for public comment, but there is no public. So, we're going to bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Chesser.
This seems totally reasonable to me, an actual, real mother-in-law cottage. I'm going to move that we approve CUP 14-4692 with staff recommendations of approval.
Second. All right. We have a motion to approve by Commissioner Chesser and a second by Commissioner Aubrey. Mr. Garner?
Noble?
Yes.
Shelby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Hoskins?
Yes.
Yesser?
Yes.
Anchel?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Motion carries.
We're batting 1,000 tonight. And the final item on the agenda is rezoning 14-4703, submitted by city staff for property located at the northeast corner of Weddington and Rupel within the Weddington Corridor Neighborhood Plan area. The property is Zone C1 Neighborhood Commercial, C2 Thoroughfare Commercial, IPZD Industrial Plan Zoning District, and contains approximately 6.88 acres. The staff, or the request is to rezone the property to community services. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew, would you like to make a comment at all to begin, or shall I read my report?
Sure, I'll just make a quick comment. We found this weekend, there was a typo on the public notice sign. And so, for that reason, we're requesting the item to be tabled. We will have to notify the public again, post the sign with the sign accurately written, and so we're requesting it to be tabled. We won't be able to get the notification up in time for your next meeting, so we're requesting it to be tabled for 1 month. But we would like to have Mr. Thompson present it and have discussion or any concerns from the commissioners.
You'd like to go ahead and present tonight?
Yes.
Even though we're okay, all right.
Okay.
Proceed.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thanks, Andrew. The subject property is located at the north of Weddington and east of Rupel Road. Properties are zoned C1, right on the corner. C2 is above that. That's currently the west side mini storage, and that property wraps around. We're having real trouble with our microphones over here tonight. Apologize. And a portion of that property owned by Westside Storage is currently in an IPZD that is expired at this time. The corner is most of this property is completely built out. The Westside Storage lot is completely built. The lots, there are 2 lots on the corner. Those are also recently built. They contain a coffee shop and other businesses typical of a commercial strip center. So we are not concerned that this property is going to be redeveloped anytime soon. This is a long-term vision to meet the requirements or to meet the policies and the visions, really, of our Weddington neighborhood plan that we passed last year. I'll get more into that in just a moment. Staff did receive comments from both property owners, and that's one way we learned about the inaccuracy in our sign posting. Mr. Dennis Caudle, who owns the IPZ portion and the C2 portion, that would be Westside Storage. We had a good conversation, talked about it for 10 or 15 minutes. He seemed very comfortable with the idea, felt like it added value to his property, and so my understanding was he was in favor of the proposal. The property on the corner, Mr. Pat Tobin was less sure that this would be a benefit for him in any way, and our conversation was a little bit brief, and I understood from his comments and tone that he was not in favor of this, but we never really got that out. But in order to make it legal and to make it correct, we are dotting our I's and crossing our T's with the signage in anticipation of further conversation there. In terms of the findings and in general, this project, I think most of you are familiar with the Weddington rezone that we have worked on, Section 1 and 3 that we did surrounding this area. This area is considered and conceived of as the heart of that part of town, and the idea is that as these properties redevelop, they should redevelop into a zoning district that encourages something a little bit different than what we've seen there in the past, so as to hopefully change the neighborhood just a bit. More walkable, more connections, more of a traditional town form. Those are the overarching goals of the City Plan 2030 and specifically of the Weddington Corridor Plan as well. So, staff does find, not surprisingly, we are proposing this, does find that the proposed zone is consistent with planning objectives, principles and policies that are put forward in those plans. And we feel like it's justified at this time, even though we are not anticipating redevelopment at any time in the future. We like to be ahead of these things before they become an issue. And we do feel like this is the most important area to rezone to make or to ensure as best we can that Weddington neighborhood plan will be implemented in the future. And we do feel like that's justified, even though we do have potentially some opposition, and we do have fully developed properties in large part. But we're trying to encourage a different development pattern in that area of town. And we've seen what we get when we keep the same, or if we keep the same zones that we've had out there. It becomes suburban, it becomes further sprawl. And these are not, CS is not a solution, a complete solution to that, but it is really trying to make a better a feature out there, to mitigate or to minimize the, impact of certain kinds of development. So, you know, the CS, the proposed zones, would allow for a variety of different kinds of use, residential uses, offices, commercial businesses. All of those are located close to the street, as opposed to back from the street. So we encourage people to build. And the main difference, particularly on the C1 portion, is that any future development would have to be within a build-to zone, 0 to 25 feet from the right-of-way. And that will, you know, the goal is to create a more pedestrian-friendly, less automobile-oriented development pattern in the future, and that what we consider to be hope to be the densest heart of that neighborhood. And so, that's the reason we're bringing this forward. And unfortunately, we are requesting that you consider it, but table it tonight, and we anticipate coming back, I believe, on May 27. We will have met our notification goals and deadlines, and that's when we should be seeing this again.
Okay. Let's see, there is no public, so no public comment.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one question. If the city council does rezone these, will these be non-conforming properties?
They will, but they will be allowed to continue in their current arrangement without, they will be limited in their ability to expand in the future. Again, I don't feel like that's a great concern since they are built out, but they would be non-conforming.
Yeah, I would like to point out too that all of the uses would be allowed to continue. They could change use. Tenants could come in and out of the commercial strip center, no problem. They could do expansions, maintenance on all the buildings as needed. The only thing, basically, I think the expansion is up to 25% of the building could be expanded even as a non-conforming structure. But when the intent of the code, if it was rezoned, it would have to be built back to meet the current zoning requirements. The mini storage would immediately be an existing non-conforming use. It's not allowed by right under the community services, which would be allowed to continue. And there's this expired PZD here at the front would just be there's some vacant property that could be developed. So it's not too uncommon to see that kind of a situation when we do a neighborhood plan or sometimes a city-initiated rezoning over large areas where you're really trying to anticipate development and change the development pattern in an area. And we've done that in several neighborhoods throughout the city, including, you know, downtown being one of them, Walker Park, Fayette Junction as well, are areas where we strategically go through and look and try to anticipate how that area, the vision for the area for the next 20, 30 years.
Okay. Mr. Chair. Mr. Scott?
So, Mr. Tobin, even though your conversation was short, did he air what specifically his concerns were? Or did you get that far?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
You know, it wasn't that productive a conversation, frankly, and I ended it fairly rapidly. At some point.
I mean, it seems to me that the change is a benefit to him because it gives him more flexibility. The build-to would be one, and I guess if his building burned down or something crazy that happened, then he would not be able to rebuild like it is now. But
well, actually, he would be allowed to rebuild if it burned down, exactly as it is in the same footprint. If he were to sell that property, it were to be scraped clean and someone came through to redevelop, at that point it would not be allowed to be rebuilt as it is. But, you know, in the case of a fire, actually, he could rebuild it just as it is.
okay.
But you're correct, and I was attempting to explain, you know, those points exactly, and it wasn't welcome.
I got you.
Essentially.
Just curious. Thank you.
Maybe it was in the delivery. Never mind.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Chester.
I move that we table this item until June 9th, 2014.
Did you want May 27th or June 9th?
June 9th.
May 27th.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, June 9th.
Yeah, we have to do 15 days prior notice, so we just missed it by one day for next meeting.
Okay. Looking for a second.
I'll second.
Okay, well, I have a motion to table by Commissioner Chester and a second by Commissioner Selby. Okay, that'll work. kind of two at the same time, stereo. Mr. Garner?
Noble?
Yes.
Selby?
Yes.
Autry?
Yes.
Hoskins?
Yes.
Chester?
Yes.
Honchkroll?
Yes.
Cook?
Yes.
Winston?
Yes.
Bunch?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, now before we go, when is the next subdivision committee meeting, Mr. Garner?
It is this Thursday, and I believe the committee members know. I think Commissioner Selby is sitting in for Commissioner Honchkroll, and then we also have, Noble, and who was the third one?
Okay, so we got our commissioners for Thursday? Okay, great. We are adjourned.
We're still trying to research.